All right, and we are live. I expect the first few minutes are going to be spent delaying as people slowly start trickling in, but other than that,
Yeah.
slightly behind schedule, but what are you going to do? Oh my goodness. So, and this will be recorded on my channel after it's all done. I'm expecting the first few minutes, probably not going to be too many people, but we'll keep talking and we'll see what happens. So, I'm here with my good friend Charlie. Charlie, care introducing yourselves to the to everyone?
You know how much I like talking about myself.
Oh yeah, I know.
Uh, I,
Couldn't even get you to stop before. It was
oh yeah, that's me. Um, I'm Charlie. I'm an editor for indie fiction authors. I'm a fantasy author. I'm a game writer, and I'm disabled. So I'm very excited about this.
Oh, I know. This is a topic that is near and dear to your heart. I fully believe because
Yeah.
again, and obviously I am not. I'm not disabled myself, but I figured if we're going to discuss this topic, we need to have someone who knows what they're talking about. And
Which I
Charlie,
really
you're an
appreciate.
expert. No, I mean I would in any situation I would defer to someone who knows what they're talking about, and you especially know what you're talking about. I am, yeah. But
Yes, I'm well versed on this one.
you could say you have some firsthand experience here and there.
A bit, yeah.
You dabble. And of course, Charlie, I think I can say this. You're currently editing a manuscript I sent you. Um,
Yeah.
that is not at
Yes, I
all.
am.
However, that being said, please don't let that influence how anything on the stream, especially if you hate the book. In which case, especially.
I won't
Um,
let you know yet.
oh,
I'm just
good,
kidding.
good.
That was mean. I'm sorry.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Let me just adjust the volume slightly. It looks like cool. I actually, so Charlie, just so you know, I had you extremely low on my screen because my last couple of guests have been quite loud. So,
Oh,
so to raise you up slightly, but it's all good. It's all good. All right.
sorry
So
about that.
no, it's all good. Now I think we should just. I think with a topic like this, we just dive right into the main key talking points. I should probably also give uh, a warning ahead of the stream that some of the topics here may be slightly triggering. They will be ableism mentioned, as well as a couple other things that may come up. We'll try giving fair warning before we bring up any topics that might be tough to listen to, but just so you have the heads up on that. We'll try to be as we have to be inclusive, but at the same time, sometimes these topics run into some dark territory. You get what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say. You have to expect me to come to one of my streams by this point, though. But we'll try not to be too traumatic. Um, all that being said, though, you may be traumatized with some of Charlie's opinions on a certain game that I don't think I've ever heard you talk about, Charlie. This Mass Effect game. Like I
At least
can't.
the video's not on anymore.
Yeah, we tried getting the video to work when the stream started, and my computer crashed. That's why we're a little late starting. I'll try to get videos, both videos to stream on on OBS, but from Discord. But all my screens went black, and everything crashed. I'm like, you know what? Whatever I just did, let's not do that a second time.
Yeah,
Let's not do that again.
that
Um,
ended the trying.
yeah, we just decided to stick with the cool avatar from there. But no, so all that to say, fair warning, we are going to talk about some heavy topics, but we're going to try primarily to be inclusive and positive. We can easily talk about some of the worst rep in fantasy, but I feel like that's almost, I don't know, I don't think that's as fun as talking about positive stuff. But
I agree.
in order to get started, we do have to talk about some negativity, unfortunately. Oh, and by the way,
Mm.
anyone on chat, we will try to answer your questions as much as possible. If you want your comments to be definitely read, leave a super chat. But you know, we'll try to get to you if possible, depending on how busy chat gets.
I
Um,
love questions and comments.
oh, I'm gonna read as many as I can. We have a couple already, actually. One from Sam here. Ready to rant about very bad takes? Yes, yes, we are.
Yes.
Jacob here. In an era where a guy on Twitter called liberals the R word factories, this disabled discourse is necessary. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. There's a lot of negative discourse on Twitter, and we're going to read all of it. Again, fair warning. but we're going to respond to it bit by bit and then counter their claims with some history, facts, reasons, science, etc. But I think we've delayed enough. Enough people are on the stream to start following. You know the drill by now. Let's just get started. And to start, I'm going to begin with the take that started it all right here. So, let me see my screen, make sure it's on there correctly. Yep. So we have here this hot take from someone named Stateless Sovereign. I'm not going to read their full name. I'm just going to scroll down because looking at that, that's a little. YouTube might get angry at me for saying something that early on in the stream. I'm going to make my window a little off here for a sec. So.
Their take literally makes my stomach hurt.
Oh, yeah, it should. So I'm going to read what they said, basically verbatim until I run into something that's inappropriate, in which case I will try to stop. It literally makes no sense to have disabled people in a fantasy setting. Already, no. Why can't the disabled person cast a spell on their broken legs that fixes them instantly so they can walk again? Because that's how it works. Broken legs. Charlie, do you know that people who can't walk just have broken legs and there's nothing else going on that could possibly affect them needing a cane or a wheelchair or anything like that?
No, clearly it's just the broken legs.
Legs.
Everyone who can't walk has broken legs. Just fix them.
Really, it's inconsiderate of people not to heal their legs magically. Honestly, also we have a.
We're in the way.
Yeah, exactly. We have a Felix in the chat, by the way, Charlie.
A Felix is in the chat.
Yeah, among others. I want to get to everyone, and I know Jordan. I know you sent something really cool. I haven't shown Charlie that yet, but I showed the message, but I haven't shown the cover that you sent. I'm gonna have to show that next because it's Charlie. You're gonna love this cover. It hits every box for you.
I'm so excited.
Oh, it's great. Anyway, so yeah, apparently magic can just fix broken legs and therefore cures the need for wheelchairs and canes, apparently. I didn't know this. This is news to me. If a mage's lower body is paralyzed rather than physically broke... If the mage's body is paralyzed rather than physically broken, then why can't they remove the paralysis using magic?
Yeah, so ignoring all the complexities that could go into the things that cause paralysis, why can't you just remove it using magic? Like it's a brick in your way, remove it. Okay.
Yeah, I mean it's like you can't just reach down and push the paralysis button and turn paralysis off. This is terrible. So far we're 2 for 2 in terms of terrible takes. These are both pretty bad. But it gets worse somehow. 3. Why can't the mage cast a spell on themselves which allows them to float or fly so they don't have to worry about walking? I do want to hold off on that one because that actually does touch upon some potential for interesting ideas and how fantasy can incorporate disability.
Yeah, for sure.
That's not bad. That one. Okay, so
I don't think that they meant it in a good way, but there's actually some potential there. Yes,
oh yeah, no,
absolutely.
I don't think they have any intention. I think they meant it in the worst possible way, but that's actually has a lot of interesting ideas, and I think some of the responses to this tweet actually brought up the interesting ideas. So we'll go into that in a bit and examples of how that can work and what have you. But 3 we'll put aside for now. 4. Why is there a normal-looking wheelchair in a medieval-esque high fantasy setting? Shouldn't the chair be made out of crude dwarven technology or be replaced with an animal with a saddle attached to it? So, I have 2 responses to this. One being that tons of fantasy that do include animal riding and unique creative wheelchairs. But the other thing I want to respond to that is I found something in my travels while researching this topic. I'm going to bring it up on screen right here. Let me make sure there we go. Let me knock that off. Right. So right there. So this is a post from that exhibits a sketch from 6th century China, 6th century BC China, where they have a traditional looking wheelchair essentially. Well, not like a traditional one. It's like a hand carriage essentially.
Yeah.
But it functioned quite much like a wheelchair did back in the day.
Yeah.
And again, this is just a simple mobility aid from before the birth of Christ. We're talking over 2,000 years ago, 2,600 years ago, they had stuff like wheelchairs around. So the idea that the medieval setting is somehow unusual for not having a wheelchair is ridiculous when you have this simple constructive project from that era.
I think people forget that disabled people always exist, and someone who would make a take like that would probably be one of the people who thought that like someone disabled was always just kind of like left on the side of the road and didn't partake in life at all, and that just was never the case.
100%. And like we're gonna get into this, but there's tons of reasons why people can become disabled over the course of their lifetimes. Like there's so many different reasons and possibilities, and again, with fantasy, also that's the other thing about fantasy in general. Yes, maybe the exact construction of a wheelchair is recent. Maybe let's say hypothetically, the invention of the wheelchair as we know it today is a recent invention. Okay, but you know what else wasn't present in medieval Europe? Dragons.
Yeah, really. It's the conversation about whether or not Ariel should be a black woman all over again. It's a mermaid.
Yeah.
You're gonna tell me that the mermaids, like they're mermaids.
Honestly, quite frankly, the fact that the mermaids don't look more like whales already I find more shocking than the fact that she's black or white. Like if you want to anatomically correct mermaid, in order to withstand the intense pressures of the sea as well as the intense cold, she should have a layer of blubber like a whale does. And she should have stronger, sturdier, a tail that can actually propel against the water, as opposed to like something that's like obviously like a see-through membrane fins. It's like, no, you need like a whale tail. Like you need to propel yourself over to the ocean. Forget that's what I find the bigger issue with all these all these mermaids in Disney films.
You don't like that they're not realistic enough. All right, I appreciate that. No, I'm just
realistic mermaids, damn it. Obviously, that's the big issue with Disney's mermaid stuff, not everything else with Disney, but I digress. Okay, so the rest of this offensive statement, once you have magic in a setting, it makes no sense to have disabilities. The only way you could make this work is if you make the magic extremely rare and difficult to obtain, or make it so that magic is so dangerous and unreliable that it really gets used. I think the work I'm working on is a different solution. Magic just accelerates the body's natural healing processes. So if you're injured, it'll leave a scar like any other injury would, just it heals faster. That's one solution. If your only options is magic is rare or magic is dangerous, then your magic system stinks. Because you really need to think of ways that is that the only reason that you can figure out why magic won't just cure everything. And again,
you're absolutely right. When we talk about building magic systems, like I'm an editor, I teach authors how to do this. The very biggest thing, the most important thing that you can focus on when you're building a magic system is the limitations of that magic. Because if it can just do everything, then why do you even have the story? Exactly. You can probably get from start to finish in your story much easier than the route you're going to take your characters on, which makes your story useless. Why did you even write this? You have to set limitations on your magic system. So this just ignores that completely, which tells me this person has no idea how to make a magic system.
Exactly. And even, let's just say, hypothetically speaking, your only experience with magic is like D&D or something like that. Well, Dungeons and Dragons still, if you lose your arm in D&D, cure wounds won't just grow it back.
Right.
You actually have to roleplay that. There's mechanics for losing a limb in D&D, in Pathfinder, which I think Paizo is just very underrated as a company. I think they added in. I think we were discussing this before. It was either you or I was talking with someone else. I think they added wheelchair mechanics to Pathfinder 2 Second Edition, but I'm not positive. If anyone in the chat plays Pathfinder regularly, let me know if they
That's really cool.
Wheelchair mechanics. I do want to bring up the combat wheelchair from Dungeons and Dragons. That's a fan made thing, but I'll get to that in a little bit because I feel like we have to get through this introduction and then talk about the stuff that we actually want to talk about.
Yeah,
we have to come through the prerequisite discussion of the controversy before we can talk about some fun stuff.
Yeah.
So in other words, you would have to heavily tone down the fantasy in high fantasy, which kind of defeats the purpose. A low magic fantasy setting can work, but it requires good writing to make it interesting. I would make the argument that all writing requires. I think all writing requires good writing, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Charlie, what do you think? I mean, you're an editor. You would know more than I would.
Yeah. I mean, anyone who wants to write a story where they're just going to pretend that disabilities don't exist is not someone who has good writing. that right there kind of tells you everything you need to know.
100%. And I think a factor is that 100%. I think another thing too is that if you look at fantasy as a world where anything can happen because magic, it's like then the problem there becomes that if you're so limited, you can't imagine something functioning in your fantasy world, and you can't come up with a good way it could function, a good way it could fit into everything. Then I feel like that proves you're not that good of a writer. Like you're not that imaginative. And I do want to highlight this beautiful piece of artwork. I'm not sure who did this pixel art, but it's really cool. And
isn't it neat? I love that.
So cool. I love the purples and the violets. It's just beautiful. And we're gonna get to the combat wheelchair in a second, but just this, I can imagine. Like I know kids when I was growing up who would play D&D and who were in wheelchairs. Like I can't imagine how happy they'd be to see something like this if they could just like growing up they had something like this in their lives. Like that's like yes, we're gonna talk about the more interesting adult stories with the crazy stuff, but even the imagination of a kid, you know, looking at that. There's something really. I don't know, I think it's the pixel art. I always think of like nostalgic stuff when I like see pixel art. It has like a real. Oh, it's.
It
AI.
feels very like.
Oh, it's AI.
Oh no!
Oh no!
All right, let's stop talking about the picture.
Someone in the chat just said it's AI.
Thanks for telling us.
Oh, okay, good.
I hate it now.
Now I hate it. It's disgusting. It's the worst. I did this.
It's the worst thing.
Oh, we almost had.
We can't have anything good.
No.
God.
This was the robot apocalypse they were warning us about. This is the robot apocalypse in that way. I was trying to move my my camera on stream, but I realized that I was just grabbing at my actual screen, not knowing what I was doing just now. That's how it works.
Oops.
Anyway, so yeah, that's the initial source of the drama was were those comments. But we, you know, looking at that, we can think of a few examples of fantasy. People reacted to this like in mass. They were massive amounts of reactions, backlash to this original post, and you know, this guy's talking. You know, it's got me thinking and got you thinking. Like, what are some examples of fantasy literature that incorporates disabilities? And we're saying fantasy as a catch-all in this case. While we are going to try focusing more on fantasy, I can't argue that when discussing this stream, Charlie and I were both like, you know, yeah, but what about like Mass Effect? What about X-Men? What about like? So we
no one who knows me and in the chat will believe that I brought up Mass Effect.
Charlie, I have never known you to like Mass Effect. Your avatar does not at all have a Mass Effect.
I forgot I'm wearing an N7 sweatshirt in that.
Yeah, no, you have never liked Mass Effect in your life. You can't convince me otherwise. Never. Now, I do want to show you this. I'll show Jordan's cover in a second. This was really cool. Okay, so I'm going to show you this. I'm just put it on the list right here so I don't lose track of it. Yeah, it's a really cool book from the looks of things. Oh, hang on, go away. I don't want you doing that. Cool. Sorry. I was trying to get signed up for stuff. So let's talk a second about. So I saw a bunch of tweets that kind of echoed the same things we're saying. I'm not going to regurgitate those. They've already said what we're going to say. I do want to talk about a few characters with disabilities who I think a lot of people in these conversations brought up. Characters who I personally really admire. I think characters who you admire. And why they're so interesting. As well as, I think, in a few points, talk about authors who have incorporated disabled characters in their fantasy and what that means to the
Yeah.
authors in question, how that impacts the works in question. I know we both thought of one author and one character in particular who has a cane that we immediately talked about, but I want to hold off on him for a second. I really want to talk about the first character who came to my mind when I was thinking of this, and that is a little short, bratty kid.
Oh my god, are you thinking of literally the second person on my list in the desk in front of me?
Is that literally the second person on your desk in front of you?
Literally, yes, the one you just mentioned before.
Yeah.
Not the same bratty little kid, but that's still very cool.
Who are you thinking of?
Toph.
Toph. Yeah, well, that was the third one I was gonna think. It was Toph.
I mean, you said bratty little kid. I was like, wait.
I mean, they're both little kids and they're both bratty, in my opinion. I mean, I know he's 15, but that's a kid. 15's a child.
That's a kid. It's absolutely a child.
But Toph next. We'll talk about Toph next. But just because I already have Ed on screen, let's talk about Edward.
That
Elric.
is yes.
So Edward Elric, in case you haven't seen FMA, in which case stop this stream and watch FMA. Like, what are you doing? Why haven't you watched FMA yet? Anyway, he gives up an arm and a leg for his little brother. I almost said twin brother there. To save his brother's life after they tamper with the laws of God and nature to bring their mom back, and from there have an adventure in the annals of fascism and playing God, essentially. That's a bad summary of FMA, but there we go.
Yeah, that's intense.
It's intense. And at the same time, they find a way to save money on both babysitting and dog sitting at the same time. I'm surprised more parents don't take that solution.
I'll keep it in mind.
Anyway, I'm very sorry to everyone who got that joke. And if you haven't gotten it yet, no, I'm not going to force it more. So Edward Elric obviously is missing an arm and a leg, but as you can see from any picture where he has his gloves on, it almost looks like he has all of his limbs attached. But as you can see, let me see if I can get a picture of it right here. Oh, yeah, okay, I guess that's the TV tropes page that I opened up by accident. Edward Elric has a metal arm and leg that's attached to his body, and yeah, so they're attached. He gets them surgically attached by his totally not girlfriend and not future wife, Winry, who is one of the best characters in the show. I love Winry so much. She is so awesome, and I love how she has like a non-combative role, but still has a central role in the plot. In some ways, I don't know. I can babble about Full Metal Alchemist for hours, but I wouldn't even know where to start. I think with Ed, what's so interesting is that a lot of people kind of forget this as an option to either amputation, artificial limbs. Charlie, can you speak to any of that, or
like in general, or
in general,
in like fantasy?
I think in general or in fantasy, whichever you feel more comfortable talking about, or whichever you feel more interested talking about, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to look at a character like Edward, who has essentially replaced the lost limbs, and say that the disability is gone. But any amputee is going to tell you that that's absolutely not the case. There's a lot of complexities that go into that, that go into living with prosthetic, which is basically what that is. Yeah, it's really high tech. Yeah, it looks really awesome. It's a prosthetic limb. You are still disabled if you have a prosthetic limb. Mm-hmm. So he's an example that I really enjoy, because it's such a cool way of blending the world that they had accessible, the technology that they had accessible, without saying, okay, we're actually going to just cure this. The limbs didn't grow back.
And in fact, the show really shows the dangers of playing with human flesh with the magic of science. It's like a bit of a taboo in the whole show for a very good reason. And
they lean into that. I love that they did that. Yeah.
And they play the metal, the automail that comprises the limbs. They go into how its shortcomings. They mm-hmm. show it break. They show it need tune-ups. They show how it can be like even a little bit off if the rest of the body grows but the arms don't. And they have that one
Yeah,
scene
they
where-
show how he has to live with his disability.
exactly. And
He got prosthetics, but he still has to live with his disability.
oh yeah, and that's a testament to the amazing writing, because
Yeah.
FMA is one of the best fantasy stories written. Just from
Yeah.
from
It's such a
character
good
perspective.
example of this conversation where like you don't have to have your character completely unable to do anything ever again, but you also don't have to cure the disability and pretend that it's not there and pretend that nothing ever happened.
Until the end.
It's
Until the end
Yeah,
of the
well, yes.
series. But that's different.
it's the blend that you need.
Exactly. But one character who never is quote unquote cured of the disability is Toph, which brings in the other.
Yes.
And Toph is, I think that's an interesting discussion though. Like, how would you, with the discussion of the curing quote unquote of disabilities, I feel like that's a very loaded point of discussion.
Yeah.
Like obviously, augmentation can maybe help you show you how you can live with a disability, and that's one method of dealing with a debilitating injury. Not debilitating; it's the wrong word, but a traumatic injury. Is it the right word?
That's a fair word.
It's a fair word?
That's a fair word. Yeah, absolutely.
With that kind of injury, but with Toph, it's interesting because she's not injured. She has not become disabled. She is
Right.
born disabled, and I think that's a
And-
big distinction too with all this.
Absolutely. And people like Toph and real world people who are born with their disabilities or whose disabilities come about because of something genetic or something down to the cell level are such an important part of why that conversation around curing disabilities is a problem. You're talking about eugenics at that point. You're talking about changing and removing certain genes that don't fit into what society thinks people should look like or how people should be able to move or whatever. And I think that often gets forgotten because most of the disabilities that we do see in media and most of the disabilities that we do end up talking about, like that original post, was all about someone becoming paralyzed or breaking their legs or whatever. We sometimes forget that some of these disabilities are down to a cellular genetic level. You cannot, quote unquote, cure them without changing the whole makeup of the person. And you could argue, when someone has a disability from injury, you could absolutely also say that you can't separate that from the person either because it does shape them. Being disabled, no matter how you became disabled, is going to shape who you are. But especially when we're talking about disabilities that people are born with or that nothing caused except DNA. You can't cure that without eugenics. That's what we're getting into when we talk about curing disabilities. That's the root of the problem.
And that's a very dangerous track to go down for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is that a character like Toph, especially, never. One thing I love about Toph, aside from the fact that she is born blind and is never cured of her blindness and never engages in any, and never even entertains the idea of that, is she's entirely self-sufficient, probably more self-sufficient than anyone else in the series, and
she had to be. She's disabled.
Exactly. Yeah. There you go. And makes tons of jokes about her.
Oh yeah.
About the situation. Like there's so many great scenes in Avatar where she's just cracking jokes about like like just like small moments here and there, and that humor I think adds a lot to her character because even Charlie, having one conversation with you tells me that you have a sense of humor about things. So like a real a bit of a grim sense of humor sometimes, but a sense of humor nonetheless. But like in general, like Toph has she's funny, she makes light of the situation, but it's never like at her expense, which is something important. Like she'll make jokes about it, but never like she
doesn't have to be self-deprecating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a really nice touch. And I think Toph and Edward Elric were the first two that most people thought of because they're just such iconic characters from iconic shows that came out at the same time, really. And
the writers in those shows do things that I would press any author, whether they're disabled or able, writing disabled characters to do. They make it all match the world and match the magic and match the character. So, like if we're looking at Toph, because it's such an elemental magic system in Avatar. Um, they used elemental things for her to be able to get around, for her to be able to manage her life, for her to be able to become self-sufficient. They leaned into it exactly like they did with Edward, where they leaned into the tech that was available.
Mm-hmm.
And they also can then use that as the shortcomings. And just like you said, same thing with the character. If a character like Toph is super sarcastic and is going to crack jokes, let them do it about the disability too. Let that be part of that personality. I think people shy away from that last one sometimes, but Toph's such a good example of why that works. Lean into your character even after they become disabled.
Mm. And one thing too, actually thinking of that as well, with Toph's earthbending, she can obviously sense shock waves through the earth, so she can kind of maneuver around, see that not see, but like register that things are around her in certain directions.
Yeah, see in a way.
Exactly, but I think that Toph, when she does this, it works better, in my opinion, than something like, say, Daredevil. Even though I love Matt Murdock as a character, like, he basically has a sonar sense where he can map out where everything around him is physically, and like he can see better than someone with sight, essentially.
Yeah, he's given like a super sense.
Yeah, like it almost defeats the I mean, yes, he is still blind. Yes, he remains blind, and yes, they do have some writers really deal with that topic very well. But there's always that sense of like, well, now you have a sonar sense that you can. So it's almost like this. It's almost like nothing. I mean, it's not like nothing's lost, but it almost has a feeling like they wanted
to hide it.
They want to deal. They want to deal with the blindness, but they don't want to deal with it too much. You know.
Yeah.
Whereas with Toph,
it was there. That's one of my least favorite characters because it was always, to me, especially as a disabled person, it's always felt like it was a shtick. You know, it was like he's only blind for the superpower. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes sense. It makes sense. I think I love Matt Murdock as a character because of the whole Catholic guilt thing, which I can relate to very well.
Fair.
But no, in terms of blindness, Matt Murdock's very odd, especially when you compare him to someone like Echo, who just had a series recently, who is deaf and an amputee. And I think that influences her character more than Matt's blindness influences him. Even though the blindness is always relevant, it's telling that in most stories, people don't realize that Daredevil's blind until like something tips them off in some way. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now I do want to talk about a couple comments before we continue, because I know there's a couple characters we definitely want to talk about, but I feel like I've ignored the comments enough to already. Alphonse. Talk about Alphonse. God damn it. Talk about Alphonse. Don't forget Edward's teacher, Izumi. A lot of Alphonse.
Alphonse Elric.
Yep, and a lot of people saying Edward, which I can only imagine references the wonderful times that Edward and Al learned how to save money on both babysitting and dog sitting, with one simple solution that you can try at home right now if you decide to break the laws of God and nature to do so. But Alphonse Elric, I do think that is something worth discussing as well, since he has a bit of a more extreme disability than most other people in the entire series of FMA, in that his entire body's missing. Yeah. But I feel like there's less to talk about there because like it's so supernatural. It almost is like hard to connect that to any like correlative real world disability. Maybe I'm mistaken, but I feel like that's so fantastical it almost feels hard to like ground it to our reality in that way, beyond the situation of the human drama, of course.
I mean, I agree with that. I think they did a good job of like keeping Al's mind and like alchemy knowledge or martial alchemy, or you know, that aspect of things. So I appreciated that, but it's definitely different level. it is harder to connect Alphonse to real world disability rep than it is with Edward. Obviously,
Hmm.
we couldn't do what happens to Alphonse in the real world.
No.
Um, if
No.
we did, I mean, I wonder if we would consider that a cure, but I don't think we could. Um,
Yeah.
I don't think we could consider that a cure. So I still don't think that would be an example of like curing a disability.
Hmm. I do want to talk about Izumi from FMA, but I did find one example in chat that
Mm.
is the closest we will ever get to the Alphonse situation, and it's in a sci-fi piece, um, and I feel there's a lot of potential here to get sidetracked in this discussion. So I'll just bring it up now because I do think it's an interesting topic. Um, so Charlie, how familiar are you with Ghost in the Shell?
A little,
I am
not super.
trying to find a safe for YouTube image of Ghost in the Shell because so much of it
I don't
is
think that's gonna happen.
um okay, this is the closest I can find to a well, there's a few images, but this might be the one that I'm the most like comfortable with. Here we go. There we go. So, Ghost in the Shell is a cyberpunk series, obviously. Motoko Kusanagi, the main character, and most of the officers of Section 9, their entire bodies are prosthetic. Their entire bodies are replaced with cyberpunk augmentations, and I mean that's really it. That's the gist of it. The only things that are organic is maybe their brains, which are partially organic.
Hmm.
Um, Chat has brought up that this might count as a disability, but I don't really see it as that because it it, it feels very much like transhumanism, which is a whole different discussion.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I'm not sure
I
how you guys
definitely
feel about
think
this
there's
one.
an argument to be made for like once your humanity is taken away, that you are in a way disabled. But I also think that that could very easily take a path into like an ableist conversation where we're talking about non-physical disabilities
Hmm.
and the way some people are looked at as less than human. Um,
Yeah.
and in a world like with Ghost in the Shell, everyone is like that, from what you're saying. So like,
It's a little complicated. A lot of it is because Ghost in Shell is a world that's very aware of capitalism. It becomes a very capitalistic perspective where those with money and status can afford more intense augmentations, but also if you're
oh
working in
well,
the
that's extremely realistic. But
oh yeah no it's
oh, you
uncomfortable.
did say it was cyberpunk, so that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah,
That
yeah.
would be an aspect of it.
They use
Okay.
the transhuman element to really play up into the military complex, government espionage, government overreach. There's a
Mm.
lot of really clever. I think Ghost Shell's a very clever series. It is, though, very. Let me phrase that. Some of Ghost in the Shell is very clever. The original
Mm.
anime films and standalone complex are brilliant. The manga, I have more mixed feelings on, even though I have the first volume. I think after that it becomes Shiro Masamune's very thinly veiled attempt to just write hentai, um,
Ah,
which I can't
well
fault
then.
him for it. He likes
Yeah,
cyberpunk hentai
I
apparently.
mean, make yourself happy, you know?
Just don't make it the thoughtful, intelligent cyberpunk series, or do actually
Yeah.
one of the two. I'm not sure which. I'm not sure if we needed more of the hentai elements or less. It really depends on how far in the
The
manga
day of
you
the
are.
week.
That too, also. Anyways, that's one thing. Izumi, though, Ed and Al's teacher from FMA, dealing with a debilitating injury
Yeah.
that can be affect the quality of life. Without going into spoiler territory, because that's kind of the whole leads into the whole crux of the series with the Philosopher's Stones, but and human transmutation. But I digress. Um,
Yeah.
So it's being brought up that Hiromu Arakawa, who did FMA, used to work in a farming community, and possibly she might have seen some lost limbs in farming, but I don't know if we can. I'm not sure how
Huh.
much we can base that in. I'm not sure unless she said something directly. I know she's famously private. Um, I wouldn't know for sure. I would make an assumption like that unless I had a direct quote from her. Because we do have a direct quote from at least one author who wrote about disabilities with their main character from firsthand experience with using a cane. I feel like we should just. Oh, and before it gets too sidetracked, Jordi LaForge from Next Generation was brought up as well.
Okay, I love
Who,
that example.
yeah, Jordi's great. I love Jordi in Star Trek. I like him better in reading Rainbow personally, but I'm just a little biased. I don't know. I'm just saying. But he has a visor that allows him to see light spectrums, but it's not
Right.
light frequencies, I should say, but only specific ones. It's not like an exact. It's more like it almost at times feels like very strong sunglasses in a way where you can just help augment image visuals. And while I cannot, I don't know how you feel about that personally. I think that's an interesting sci-fi demonstration of how technology can help a disabled person live. I mean, obviously, in Next Gen,
Yeah.
he loses his visor at points and
Yeah.
has to deal with that. So it's not like they ignore his blindness completely. In some episodes, more than others, but in other episodes, it is not really. He's very normalized, which is good.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
there is the downside of that they don't really play. It's you sometimes forget that he even has a scene. He's blind. Because
I
it's
don't.
just so at times I should say.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't necessarily always think that's a bad thing.
Mm.
The normalization anyway. Um, I mean, growing up as a kid, watching Next Generation, being completely obsessed with space, and seeing someone who effectively in my little kid mind was like, oh, that's what glasses would look like if I was in the future in space, whatever. And if you wear glasses, you are disabled. I know that will be news to some people, but it is fact. So this is a disabled person who has an aid and has made the most of it. And I think that is what was normalized. I don't think they used the normalization to erase the disability. I think they made the fact that he had it and was living with it and was dealing with it. That's what was normalized.
And that's a fair point too. Also, chat has mentioned that, which I have forgotten about because it's been way too long since I've seen Next Generation. The visor causes Jordi discomfort and migraines. That's another factor as well. I'd forgotten all about that.
Which my glasses also did as a kid. So I really love Jordi.
No, I love Jordi too. I just forgot that. I forgot that detail with the visor, but migraines. But no, yeah. And again, I'm really playing devil's advocate with this. In general, Next Gen is usually really good with, consistently really good with all that, except when it comes to depictions of non-binary aliens. Though through no fault of the writing staff, actors involved, it was all just a very specific producer held them back from doing that one episode as they wanted to. But I do think we should start talking about Leigh Bardugo here.
Yeah.
Because I think we were discussing this before. Specifically, I found this article that was very interesting about author Leigh Bardugo, who I personally know from the Shadow and Bone and Six of Crows books. She is a very prolific writer, and this article came out around the time I think the TV show was airing its second season. But Leigh Bardugo. Okay, maybe we should take a step back. I might be jumping the gun here a little bit. Let's talk about Kaz Brecker, who I'm sure you wanted to definitely discuss.
I mean, Kaz, the author, and I all share a condition called osteonecrosis, which is awful and super painful, and that's why Kaz needs a cane. And Leigh also uses a cane. Correct? Yes, I didn't make that up.
Leigh Bardugo uses a cane on occasion. I don't think it's like every day, but I think some days more than others, if I understand it correctly.
Sure. Yeah, makes sense with a pain disorder.
Mm-hmm. Right
Yeah.
here we have a couple quotes actually regarding canes. So we have a quote right here from Leigh Bardugo saying, "Oh God, I've written a cane-wielding antihero. I guess I was writing myself into this book. I will candidly say a lot of Kaz's swagger has helped me on the days when I'm feeling self-conscious or when, quite honestly, my own internalized ableism gets the better of me." I feel like,
Oh, yeah.
more honest words have not been spoken. Here's a photo of her with the actor who plays Kaz on Shadow and Bone, among other details in this article. Here's another line from the article I'm reading right now. I'm just going to read it verbatim. I'm going to highlight it right here if you want to read along yourself. Except you can't because my face is... Oh, God, my face is in the way. Like, move that out of the way. There we go. Leigh recognized immediately why fans of her novels would tell her that they envision Kaz as an elderly man when reading Shadow and Bone books. She noted in the interview that it's because you've never seen anyone in media with a mobility aid that isn't an ancient crone. I'm keenly aware of this because that was a huge part of my hang-up, and I didn't really recognize it until I was in it.
Yeah, I think canes especially are associated with like old age and that kind of thing, which is a disability in and of itself in a way. But I absolutely understand
100%.
what she's saying there. Yeah.
But
I think.
Sorry, cut you off there.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, you go first. I was going to change topics. I was going to change gears a little bit, but slightly.
I think I was too, maybe. I think one of the reasons that both abled and disabled people actually kind of fear or hold back from writing disabled characters is that they're afraid to show any sort of like negativity. It feels like if you're going to write a disabled character, you have to write them as like super positive all the time to take on life with their disability because we're brave. And Kaz spits in the face of that. Kaz is a miserable little bastard. And he's mad about his pain too. He's angry that his body hurts and he does not feel well. And he doesn't hide that. And I love that. I want more writers for games or books or whatever to just be okay showing the negatives, your character might be on this grand adventure or whatever, but if their body hurts, that's what I love most about Kaz, that the author was willing to lean into that negativity when so many people won't write disabled characters at all because they're afraid of the negativity.
100%. And there's so much too with that. And with Kaz especially because he's such a miserable angry bastard. He is so pissed at everyone.
So angry.
And we can get into the whole discussions about how, there's obviously some, I think, OCD anxieties with physical contact from trauma.
Sure, yeah.
And that's something else. But, a lot of his character is informed by his physicality, which is, needing that cane, being in pain, but also kicking everyone's ass when the chips are down.
Yeah.
And I think his living with pain allows him to also take a lot of pain in turn and then deal it back to whoever wrongs him or gets him mildly upset, or gets in his way alternatively, which I think really informs. I remember when I was first reading Six of Crows, I was reading reviews on Goodreads and whatever, going "Oh, I can't believe this guy just beats everyone up. It doesn't make any sense." I'm like, no, it makes total sense. He's lived with pain. He carries a cane with him that can be a very painful weapon when you hit someone with it. That informs every aspect of his personhood, and I think that's something that really is quite clever about the way Bardugo writes Kaz.
And so many people are afraid of that, where they're like, if I make this disability my character's whole personality or so much of their personality, then I'm doing something wrong. The reality is that when you live with something like osteonecrosis, you're in pain constantly. It's from your body breaking down, and there's nothing that can be done about that. So yeah, you're miserable about it. Some days more than others, it sucks. Yeah. And I like that even with Kaz having the disability and Kaz having his cane and Kaz having being, you know, a total badass and kicking ass whenever he can, he also has limitations.
Exactly.
And there are things that he'll never be able to do because of his disability, which is, again, something that people shy away from with writing them. And, you know, we don't need to do that. Someone on your tweet announcing this chat actually commented about a character in Fear and Hunger 2. Olivia is in a wheelchair and can't do things like go upstairs, and can be knocked out of the wheelchair and then has to spend a turn trying to get back into the wheelchair. The way I need to go play this character in this game, I'm like desperate for it. It's okay to show the realistic limitations of some disabilities in that way. It's not something we have to be afraid of, you know. She's in a wheelchair. Shit is gonna be in the way. It's not easy to live in a wheelchair. Believe me, it kind of sucks sometimes. It's so good to see characters actually living with their limitations too. I love that.
And this is a game I've not played. Fear and Hunger, though. Looking at the images for it, I feel like this is entirely in my
right up your alley.
Oh, yeah. This is morbid looking. I'm loving this. This looks the kind of dark, horrifying stuff I'm drawn to. Has like a gothic, I love your chair. Has like a gothic kind of RPG vibe, which I'm all about.
Yeah. I think people just get scared to be like, okay, and it was actually in that original, in the original tweet, the tweet that started all of this discourse this time around. You know, why can't they just move in a different way? And people tend to take that mindset instead of saying, okay, why can't we just explore the limitations of moving like this? 100%. And again, you know, lean into the world, lean into the magic, lean into the character. I mean, can I give a personal example from what I'm writing?
Absolutely. Please, hey, listen. By the way, if anyone does not know this in chat, Charlie is an extremely talented writer, and you should absolutely market yourself on this stream.
Well, even without, you know, the marketing aspect, I'm writing a character in a wheelchair who is in a pirate fantasy book. Wheelchairs and ships don't mix, period. And I'm not forcing them to mix. It's about leaning into the world and leaning into the character. Like I keep saying, this is a character who is very independent, but is also very playful. So there are things like another character giving them a piggyback ride around the ship. Them kind of going down a ramp and going, wee! Which I actually do in real life. And it scares the hell out of people, and it's delightful.
Oh, I love that. I would love to see people's reactions to that.
They don't like it. They don't like it, but I do. So that's all that really matters. But it's just like with Kaz or Olivia or any character, right? Toph too is a good example of this, where like the limitations are good too. It sucks that we're limited, but you don't have to hide that any more than you have to hide the disability. It's okay.
100%. And that's a beautiful thing about writing these types of characters, because there is so many ways of illustrating them living with these conditions and thriving and having fun with it, and also being pissed off about it. Because I think at the end of the day, like with character writing, it's all about showing the many ways that people can function in society or not function alternatively. Because people have moments where they can function and not function under normal circumstances, let alone under extreme ones. And I think like when art reflects that very human experience, it accomplishes something very profound. And it is showing how we as people can experience the world in ways that is both uplifting and horrifying and painful and agonizing all at the same time. And I think especially with disability rep, the problem is that people have to iron it down to the normalized experience. And again, using Daredevil as an example, they do have to re-emphasize how he can see better than everyone else, because they have to ground it in the tropes of the superhero genre that they're familiar with.
Yeah.
Even if the story is otherwise fantastic, that element does take you out of it a little bit because you go, wait a second, so why? What function? What is this really accomplishing? What you think it's going to accomplish? Or
Yeah. And the more disability rep we have, the more normalized that is, the more the conversation will change. N.K. Jemisin wrote the Broken Earth trilogy, which won 3 Hugo Awards for all 3 books for best novel. So this is an extremely well-selling, probably I'm going to argue that she's the best writer of our generation. And she includes a character who is blind. Ori is blind. And when NK talks about it, people always ask, why did you make this character blind? And her response is always, why aren't you asking why I made everyone else not blind?
Exactly.
That's why.
I'd say N.K. Jemisin is
changing the conversation.
Okay, and N.K. Jemisin, if you have not read the Broken Earth trilogy,
oh my god, go do it.
Read it. This book is so good, it literally inspired an entire rift in the frickin' Hugos. This book is incredible. The first book's incredible, the second book's incredible, third book I've not read yet. I know.
It's amazing.
I haven't read the third book in that series yet, but the other 2 books are fantastic, so it's not by a lack of the books being fantastic. Also pretty good is the city that we...
City We Became.
City We Became is also excellent too.
And The World We Make. Yeah, those are really good.
Haven't read the second one yet, but I read the first one. And that's a fantastic book as well. There's a lot of books that I need to finish because there's a lot of book series I start, but I don't finish the series. It's really bad. I'm sorry.
I appreciate too that NK is not disabled. Not physically anyway. I'm unaware of any other disabilities that she has, but as far as I know, as far as she has said, she is abled, and still finds it necessary to write disabled characters so that we can change the conversations that we're having, just so that we can have more representation, which is how it all starts, you know? We need to see more disabled characters in media in order to have these conversations and then change the narrative.
Exactly. And I think that's one thing as well, where it's like a lot of authors I can imagine. I mean, I know as a writer myself, I get nervous writing about human experiences that I'm not personally familiar with, because obviously...
Sure.
I mean, but that being said, you know, there is a fear of taking that first step to doing something versus the hesitancy, I should say, not the fear, the hesitancy to do it correctly. Because a lot of writers, what they'll do is they'll take shortcuts. And I think one example of this that I'm not as positive about, that came up a lot during discussions about the disabilities, was, I think, an example that was for a while, and I still think it's science fiction fantasy because it's a superhero story, but a great example of this would be Barbara Gordon from the DC Batman comics. You know, to use an example of a character who for a while was seen as a peak disabled rep, like was winning awards for it, and then they just they destroyed it.
Cured it.
They ruined it. Like in a matter of hours, they destroyed all of this. For those of you who are unaware, Barbara Gordon was in the famous graphic novel The Killing Joke, shot through the spine by the Joker, was paralyzed from the waist down, but became a figure known as the Oracle, who's basically Batman's man behind the chair, so to speak. Became an expert hacker, brilliant character, really well written. Organized the Birds of Prey, which gathered together other female superheroes in a team of all women. Great run by Gail Simone there. But when it came time for DC to relaunch their whole books, the New 52, to draw in new readers, they put Barbara Gordon back in the cowl as Batgirl. They found I think it was like a cybernetic implant that allowed her to ignore her spinal injury. They
didn't even get really far into it. They just said there was like a surgical cure. So basically, it was over. She was fine.
And a couple comics where they disable the mechanisms that undo the injury, but it always gets resolved by the end of the story. It's always like a minor inconvenience in the scheme of things. Yeah, it's extreme in like that one comic, but they forget about it like an issue later.
Yeah.
It's treated as like a kryptonite rather than, you know, like it feels weird and disingenuous. And again, there were a lot of controversies about Barbara Gordon becoming Batgirl again. One of which being, of course, that Stephanie Brown and Cassandra Cain, who are both fascinating characters in their own respects, were removed from the cowl. Cassandra Cain also is a great example of a non-physical disability with her her speech impediments, but or rather the horrible abuse she experienced from her upbringing. But no, it just shows how cheap it was. It was they didn't even bother. They kind of and some of the comics they tried exploring this topic as best they could, but you never get over the core caveat of the situation that she can now walk, and she can walk in a way that was obviously done to get her punching bad guys in the face, because and it wasn't the writer mandate; it was an editorial mandate. It was from the top down, and you can feel that because you can feel like the writers wrestling with this idea, trying to find a good story to tell with it, but ultimately just telling another superhero story, you know?
Yeah.
And that sucks. That really sucks.
Yeah, that's one that really bothers me
deeply. And it's one of those that even like a decade on is still one of the worst decisions to be done with Barbara Gordon's character. So much so that I know the what is it, Gotham Family Adventures, Bat Family Adventures, the webcomic that was on Webtoons. It might still be going on. I'm not sure. They just ignore that whole decision entirely and have Batgirl have Barbara Gordon as Oracle still.
Yeah.
Wheelchair and everything. It's a much, and people responded well to that.
Yeah. The idea that they couldn't just keep a disabled character and had to truly fix her was just one of the decisions I hate most from DC.
Yeah, one of many decisions DC made that are just I don't like. There's a lot of choices DC made that I profoundly disagree with. But there's one in chat we've gotten a few in terms of disabled characters, and that is, of course, we couldn't go too far without mentioning him somewhere in this, somewhere here, and that's Darth Vader.
Yeah.
Star Wars will chase me for my entire life if I don't do anything about it. A quadruple amputee survivor, on life support perpetually for the rest of his life, in a mechanism that deliberately is uncomfortable. Like, I don't know how I feel about that. Like, because the idea of Vader's armor is that it's deliberately uncomfortable to him and inflicts pain on him because the dark side makes you strong if you're in agony, I guess. I don't know how you feel about that.
I think it's just a masochism thing, honestly. Like, that's what I chalk that one up to. Like, that one's masochism.
Listen, if that's how you enjoy if that's how you find value in your evenings, okay.
Yeah.
But like
I think psychologically we could dig further into that than physically.
Yeah, there's a few angles you can take that. I don't know how I feel about I mean, Vader's an odd character in general because like there's so much about him like there's a lot of I feel like people, and this might be controversial, I feel like Vader's one of those characters who audiences put more all this like thematic meaning on. Yes, he's a tragic character, but I feel like we create more tragedy to the character than is inherent in the character as featured in the movies. But I think the expanded universe really builds that because the movies he's just like
absolutely
because the movies he has like the Shakespearean rise and fall, yes, but like I feel like we as a culture have projected so much meaning on him that I feel like a better I feel like writers like N.K. Jemisin or Joy Abercrombie do a much better job writing these characters, but I feel like Darth Vader has such a chokehold on on society as a collective whole.
Yeah. I mean, on like when I think of Darth Vader, I think of all his psychological trauma, not his physical disability. You know, like at this point, like that's much more what we have delved into, which is fine because that's actually kind of more interesting than his physical disability at this point.
Agreed.
Based on what he can do. Yeah. But yeah. I at least don't mind that he's a bad guy. I know some people want all disabled people to be like a good guy and want them to be happy sunshine, and I like a disabled villain every now and then. I'm into it.
Agreed. I think it has
done right.
If it's done right, yeah.
Yeah.
I know there was one example of a character from a book series I absolutely adore that we mentioned before starting that we didn't want. I don't think we wanted to discuss because it's a whole other can of worms. But I feel like a good example of a villain who I feel is compelling, but is disabled rep done really not as well as I'd like. Is the Baron Harkonnen from Dune. Even though I did just make an entire video praising Dune and saying how brilliant it is, and I stand by that. And I do think the Baron Harkonnen is a very good villain. He's a great antagonist. But if you want a respectful interpretation of the LGBTQ community, body positivity, positive disabled rep, the Baron Harkonnen is as far from that as you can possibly get.
Yeah.
What were you thinking, Frank Herbert? I love those books, but what were you thinking? What's your thought process with this character?
Yeah, there's a lot there.
I don't even know where to even start with that is the problem. Like, Dune takes some big swings, but...
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
There's so much with that. No. I said when we started, we're not going to get into it because I can make a whole thing about that. Oh, he's such a messy freaking character. Oh, but
yeah.
Oh.
But it's the overall conversation around villains with disabilities needs to be had because people with disabilities can absolutely be bad people. The problem is when we make their disability part of their villainy. Like so many disabled villains are deformed in some way, and that is what is like harped on. That's what's constantly discussed. And the Baron's a good example of that, but there are so many others too where it's we do the same thing with like appearance, and we turn the disability into something that is very, very visible in a way that can't or isn't normalized in that world or in ours, so that the reader has something to go, ew. And then you equate that ew with the bad guy thing. That's when we get into problematic things with villains who are disabled.
Agreed.
But that isn't the same thing as saying you can't have villains who are disabled. Your bad guys can absolutely be disabled, but treat that disability in them the way that you would in any other character. They're not bad because they're disabled.
I think horror does this in a way that's hits both angles of your discussion right there. Now, Charlie, I always forget how into horror you are, so don't want to start throwing out examples where it's like you have no frame of reference for this, but like
I can usually keep up with you, but sometimes you get more obscure than I'm into.
That's fair.
But I can usually keep up.
Okay. So I'm going to throw a couple movies out at you, and I'm going to ask you if this sounds like good rep or bad rep to you. I'm just going to go rapid fire. But a couple, off the top of your head. Freddy Krueger from A Nightmare on Elm Street. Not really disabled, more of a...
But disfigured.
Disfigured, yeah. And the idea is that the internal awfulness is supposed to be externalized, but also that he is, in essence, scarred by the actions of the parents who ultimately took justice into their own hands. But also, he is deliberately making himself look frightening to the teenagers that he hunts, just to scare them. And there is that
honestly
kind of weird ownership of his own appearance that I think is...
Yeah, I think that one's a weird one, I think, because of the way that Freddy leans into it. And Freddy kind of makes it worse, I guess, is the right word there. Freddy
Yeah.
wants that to be part of who he is, his visage, and the way people think about him. And in general, deformities are often associated with disabilities, but aren't always necessarily connected. So I would actually say Freddy is okay rep. Freddy's okay.
Freddy's okay. I love that. That's the conclusion we both came to with this. I love that. But
Me and Freddy, we're okay.
Freddy's okay. Freddy, I don't want to hang out with him, but he's cool. He's cool people.
I would hang out with him.
But a good example, I think, of, and this is going off of the in terms of blindness. One really good example of, I think a movie that I think really deals with a villain with a disability that's played really well is the movie Don't Breathe. Do you know this one, Charlie?
I don't think I do.
Don't Breathe is really interesting. Don't Breathe is a movie where it takes place in Detroit. These kids, they decide to rob the house of a blind military veteran, because apparently there's money in like the basement, something like that. So they break into the house, and he's a blind old man. He's played by the same guy who played the bad guy in Avatar, the blue people, not the Airbender.
I hate the Blue People movie.
Yeah, I'm not a fan either, but he's the bad guy in that. He was the best part of the Avatar movie. I'll say that. But
the good guys in that movie are the bad guys. But okay,
genuinely, yeah, it's just awful all around. But they break into.
Does he kick the thief's ass?
Oh, yeah. He seconds after they break in, they start making they make noise, and he tracks them to the house with the noise, the sound in the house. He knows every sound of the house. He knows how every floorboard feels. So he goes in and he like fights them. But it actually, the thieves are the protagonists of the movie. He ends up being the antagonist.
What?
Yeah. So you're probably wondering, how do they make the blind old man whose house they're breaking into the bad guy?
Yeah.
It turns out he's way worse. There is a scene in this movie that I feel like I need a lot of trigger warnings before I can even get into discussing. But suffice to say, there are things about this person that are so horrible that he does in this film that he somehow makes you sympathize with the kids breaking into his house very quickly.
Okay, so he takes it too far. But the premise of like some blind guy kicking the ass of the people who break into his house thinking he's an easy target, I'm all for that. Somebody write that book. I'm into it.
That aspect of it's fantastic, and it becomes a really good thriller. It borders on horror, but it feels more like a tense thriller where you're like on edge the entire time. At a certain point, I do think it goes a little too far in one scene, and if you've seen the movie, you know what scene I'm talking about. I can't even explain what happens out of fear of YouTube demonetizing me, but it involves a turkey baster. And it's awful.
Oh God. Okay. Yeah.
No, Charlie,
too far.
Whatever you're imagining, it's way worse.
Okay.
It's so much worse.
I don't want to imagine any of that anymore. But I like that initial premise that you brought up. I'm all for that. I also like I like what you said about him being able to find his way around the house. Mm-hmm. Just about any permanently disabled person can tell you that we can do that. Whether it's with my chair or like if I'm on my crutches, I know like which path to take around the house that I wouldn't take otherwise, and like it's something that I know blind people and deaf people do. It's a cool aspect to see that. We have to map out our houses that way.
Every inch. That's incredible.
Yeah.
I couldn't even tell you where half of my house is. I couldn't do the same for my house. I hear a noise at night. I'm going like, what is that? Someone trying to break in? It's like the air conditioning acting up.
Yeah. It's weird too, because I think a lot of people, when they think about disabled people, characters or real life, they think that we're not as like aware of the world, kind of, or that we're aware of it in such a different way that that's almost a disability in itself. But more often than not, people who are disabled, especially people who are disabled in ways that force a change in how we move.
Mm-hmm.
So deaf people, blind people, people in wheelchairs, people who need mobility aids, we're usually more aware of the world than the able-bodied people around us. When I go somewhere new, I can pick out 100 things that other people aren't going to notice, which could make us more interesting in fantasy worlds,
honestly,
not less.
Yeah, and honestly, from a storytelling perspective, taking into account even like small details like that, these are the things that make a story more interesting. Especially if you come back and play into them later on in the narrative, like you set up a scene, and you know one of the big things with a lot of fantasy, especially in science fiction, are the set pieces where you can arrange elements of the entire setting to incorporate into your narrative. And I think like knowing that from the perspective of a disabled perspective, you really can piece together those elements into ways that can be dynamic and interesting. And
yeah, so it could be so cool to have an abled character, an abled POV character, show the reader the world as they walk through a setting, and then have a disabled character, maybe a character in a wheelchair, follow them through and show the same setting. It's going to be different, and it's given you a whole new level of world building. You could do the same thing around a TTRPG table where different characters are experiencing different things simply because of the way they are abled or disabled. And it's such a cool opportunity. It's a shame it's missed so often.
No, I agree. There's a lot of potential for that. All right, yeah. Charlie, you're going to hate me for what I'm about to do. You're going to hate me so much. But chat brought it up. I'm blaming you, chat.
Who did it?
Jake Sully in Avatar, the Blue People.
Christ. I'm going to try and control myself while we're talking about this movie. I have 1,001 problems with this movie.
Oh,
but
trust me.
I will.
I think there's going to be a lot of overlapping problems there. So Jake Sully in number one grossing movie of all time, again, Avatar. I don't know if I forget if they established what disability he has, but he needs a wheelchair. I think he's paralyzed at least partially from the waist down.
Yeah.
Because his brother signed up for the Avatar program, he has DNA that matches with the Avatar built for his brother who's passed away, and they transfer his soul into a genetically modified blue alien who is just physically better than people. Just all around, they're taller, they're more handsome, their hair is like a weird prehensile like USB port. He's just better than everyone else now. After going to colonize the planet for the strange unobtainium that doesn't really have any, like, never really explain how that functions like in any meaningful way.
Don't start getting me started on the writing in this thing, okay?
Yeah, no, the writing is bad. And even like I know people like were making the argument, oh well, the second film is better because, it's just more of a family story. I'm like, no, that's not good either. Neither of these are good movies in terms of writing. Visual spectacles, sure, but James Cameron, he's written better movies. So Charlie, what do you think of Jake Sully, star of the highest grossing film of all time?
I hate him.
Tell us how you really feel, Charlie.
I mean, from the start, he was given like a deal, right? Like I don't ask me to remember character names, please. I barely remember my friends' names.
Fair enough.
But he's told that if he goes into with the Avatar and gets the military intelligence that they need, he'll get his real legs back, and that's what's said to him. You'll get your real legs back. Right there, I'm done. I'm out. I mean, are you kidding me? But the entire thing, there's actually a word that really well encompasses this movie that disability advocates use a lot when talking about this movie. It's called compulsory able-bodiedness.
Mm.
And it's when the goal is to be free from disability.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happens here. It's just it's basically like a guy who's disabled and has like, I don't want to say things that are going to get in trouble, fantasies of being able-bodied, and how blissful life would be if he was able-bodied again.
It treats the
It's
body
really
like a prison
gross.
almost.
Yeah, his body.
Yeah.
Everyone else's is okay. His body specifically is a prison.
Yeah, and that colors all interpretation of his motivations from that point onward. Like any mention of him being like, "Oh no, the Na'vi are just these great aliens, and life is so great." The problem there is that you're treating it as like a release from your body. You're treating it as an escape from being disabled. So it colors all the actions that Jake Sully takes in the film from that lens. I forgot all about that. I forgot about that detail about Avatar. But then again, I forget a lot about Avatar's plot because
it makes me angry. I remember the things that make me really angry about
That's valid. I tried to focus on things I enjoyed from it, like the bad guy, and then nothing else.
Yeah.
That was about it. But it's
no.
That's
not a fan of Jake Sully.
Makes sense, and that actually plays into one of the things from the initial post that I think upset a lot of people: the idea that magic is the cure, or that removing a disability by magically plucking it out of someone or flipping off the off switch on the disability marker, that's the end goal, that everyone would aspire for that. And like,
yeah,
I'm sure.
And then the second he is disabled again, like when the guy, again, no names, when the guy smashes open Jake's like chamber. Yeah, and he has to try and get to. So the second he's back in his disabled body, instead of being, basically an action hero, instead of being capable of doing just about everything, more than, like you said, because their bodies are basically like superhuman, he can't do anything. It's completely reverted, where like not only are you back in your human body, but now your disability has completely infantilized you. I mean, she literally like picks him up and cradles him.
Yeah. The body, again, like with all of that, he's seen as his weakness. It's framed as though he's, and granted, there's other factors too, like the fact he can't breathe the air. That's one factor as well. But like, it plays into.
But he can't get to the oxygen mask. Yeah,
he can't get to the oxygen mask. He can't, and they only emphasize what he can't do. And he's completely helpless. Whereas when he's in the Avatar body, he is all powerful. And it's that really interesting dichotomy there, where they really illustrate just how they treat, how negatively it views disability. And disability has downsides. We've already expressed in media how you can show the negatives. Like, again, with Kaz from Six of Crows, him right there, he's miserable half the time, for many reasons, but his disability is one of them. It illustrates how you can create a character who can be frustrated or in pain or not enjoy the situation, but not feel powerless.
Right.
I think a good
example, and if you're going to emphasize how powerful it is to be in the abled body, you can't then create the contrast of saying, and look how pathetic and sad this is with a disabled body. That's when the real issue pops up. 100%. Like I said, I'm writing a character who's a wheelchair user who gets a piggyback ride, and you could argue that that's being carried. It is, but it's a completely different scenario than someone who has been a hero throughout so much of the story, all of a sudden needing to be babied because disabled again, so broken, basically an infant.
Exactly. It's awful and depressing and really awful. Just. And it's terrible how they can't think of a better way of using the character in that scene. Because, anyway. But no, and again, like, there's ways to illustrate a physical difference between characters that makes them still compelling. My brain always comes back to the Superman, Lex Luthor kind of conflict, where you don't need to have a physical fight with someone to combat them or be equal level with them.
Absolutely.
There's writers can get so creative with how they incorporate these types of characters into their stories, and consistently they fail to demonstrate that. They fail to show that they can do that. And there's so many easy ways they can do that. Ugh.
Yeah.
I'm gonna click away from Avatar. I've had enough of that guy. Enough of that guy.
He's so mad.
I'm very sorry for upsetting you.
It's okay.
But again, I think one interesting thing I do want to. Okay, there's Broken Kingdom. I had that open as well. Okay, so this is the one also I want to show you too. Before I show you the before I get into the combat wheelchair, I was told by Jordan.
Oh, look at that cover.
This cover's amazing, right? This is A Soul to Guide. It's the main character is blind, and it's a monster romance series.
Extra cool.
I have not read it yet, but I am going to add it to my want to read list later. This cover is
so cool.
This is so cool. I'm really loving this cover. That's an interesting cover as well. Let's get a bigger version of the cover. There we go. Let me go my face. There we go. That's what I'm talking about. That's a cool looking cover.
It sounds really cool too.
On credit, Jordan Scarsfava for recommending this one. This is really cool. I love everything about this cover. This is just a cool cover. I love it.
Yeah, that's really neat.
Top 10 coolest covers I've seen today. Yeah.
Yeah. If there's a disabled protagonist, I'm almost always going to read the book. So that's going on my list.
100% there. And
absolutely.
No, that right there is really cool. There's a few other ones too. I know one book I had read so recently. Kara Jorgensen's Earl of Brass, I think, has some disability rep in it as well, if I recall correctly.
I haven't read any of Kara's books yet. I know I should, but
Kara's got some good stuff.
Yeah. Did you read Iron Widow?
Iron Widow. I have not actually read Iron Widow yet. It is on my TBR though. Because
the protagonist has a lot of pain while walking, and gets to fly basically instead, without like getting too far into the whole summary. But it's very cool. It's very well done.
Everything about this book tells me I want to read this. I know, like, there's a love triangle in a very literal sense of the triangle, like a true love triangle.
Yeah. Like there's a lot of like mech stuff. I think you'd really like it. You should read it.
Yeah, this is like one that's been on my to be read list. I've been on I have the audiobook that I haven't started yet. This is like everything I hear with this book, and the author seems really cool too.
Yeah, the author did a really cool job in this of taking like historical aspects of some disabilities, like the reason that the protagonist is in so much pain when they're walking is lotus feet. Basically, their grandmother broke their feet in a cultural practice.
Like
so I
binding almost, or
yes, which ends up being a really cool factor in the whole way that she shaped this character's personality and the disability.
This is one I just want to read. This is one like I don't know why I haven't even. I'm not sure why I haven't read it. That's the crazy thing. Like everything about it.
I have so many books like that on my shelf. I'm like, why have I not read you yet?
Seriously,
I would love you.
Seriously, it's so ridiculous. I haven't actually gotten to read. I guess this is like the mech right here. They have a few pictures that look like they're fan art. Oh, this looks so up my alley. I'm not even.
It's really. I think you'd like it a lot.
No, definitely. All right, cool. So I want to talk a bit about
combat wheelchairs.
Combat wheelchairs. So this was an update made to Dungeons & Dragons 5e that I think was really cool. I think it's since been privated. I don't think you can find this particular fan creation anymore, but it was made by Sarah Thompson, who out of the UK. So here is a. Actually, no. No, I lied to you. I'm sorry. Mark Thompson. I'm very sorry. Did not the article. Okay, let me. So Mark Thompson. Let me get their tweet up here. Yeah, Mark Thompson. UK. Seems like a really cool person. The combat wheelchair is essentially. Okay, I feel like I feel like I messed up there, but I'm just going to read the quote anyway. For the first time, I've been confronted with how horrible people can be within the community. That I thought this. Oh no, hang on, that's not it. I feel like I skipped a beat there. Yeah, so the combat wheelchair is designed essentially to supplement the experience in D&D, so you can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like I threw myself off by misgendering this poor person. Crud. Oh my god. Now I feel like that's not good. Yes, this is Mark's account on Twitter. Seems like a really. Okay, so you can actually. It looks like you can still download the combat wheelchair right here.
Oh, cool.
So you have all that there, updated for 5e mechanics. I believe Pathfinder as well has a wheelchair mechanic as well, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, so the combat wheelchair is, and here is a dog. Apparently. Which is adorable. There we go. Anyway.
Yeah. I love the combat wheelchair. I want one for the inevitable apocalypse.
Yeah, honestly, just get the combat wheelchair. It's a lot of fun, and it's a great way to really build into your character. And again, like with D&D, all of it is about being able to transport your experiences, your dreams, your creativity into an output that is incredibly cool. And there's so many.
Yeah.
I guess, is it a little overpowered? Sure. But like, are you really playing D&D because it's balanced? like, let's be honest. Are you really?
Yeah.
Are you really min-max multi-classing your paladin barbarian? Because
yeah, really.
Is that why you're doing it? It's the Killdozer.
Yeah.
It's Killdozer in human form, but like with a happier ending. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love this, and I love especially.
Yeah, I think all of the problems that people have with it, if you were to take out the word wheelchair, and put in literally any other piece of armor, effectively in D&D, and present the same thing to the same audiences with the same stats and everything, they would have no problem.
No.
The problem is that it's a wheelchair. The problem is that they have to now imagine disabled people in their fantasy worlds, and some people just don't want to.
100% agree with that. It's the worst, because all you do is change the flavor text slightly, and you'll be night and day almost overnight. The moment it becomes a piece of inclusivity, it becomes a burden for them.
And I mean, I won't even lie. I look at the chair. I've obviously looked at the chair a lot, and I've had a lot of conversations with like sword experts and martial arts experts about what would actually be realistic in a wheelchair, like how you can grab things and how different disabilities would impact what you can do. So I look at it, and I have some questions and I have some concerns, and I'm like, well, I would need to modify this. Nope, if you keep a sword there in your wheelchair, you're going to create a new hole in a place where you don't want one. And there are conversations to be had about how we can make this better, but it shouldn't be a conversation about whether or not we can have it. That's just gross.
Agreed. And there is also discussion too with the physicality of a wheelchair versus that of a cane. Like, I feel like a cane is a lot easier to incorporate into a physically combative character's repertoire, whereas a wheelchair you need to put more thought into it. You need to be more creative. You need to think outside the box with how you would incorporate that. But that's writing. That's the process of writing.
Or in TTRPGs, it's the process of your character creation. It's the process of that development. That's kind of the point. That's why we're all into fantasy in the first place.
Mm-hmm. The imagination, the potential, the creativity. It's all the reason why we do
Yeah.
what we do creatively. And
Yeah.
like, and I think it's one thing to have a character who's like the intellectual, like the Charles Xavier character, whose greatest weapon is their mind. In fantasy, you can probably very easily have a person in a wheelchair who does magic instead of physically fighting. But
Right.
why restrict yourself to that? Like, why should
Yeah.
that be the only option? Like,
Yeah.
you should be able to swashbuckle in a wheelchair in your
Yeah.
fantasy story and have fun with it. In my opinion.
And you should be able to consider the limitations as well. It's okay to, have them go off on a swashbuckling adventure and still have to deal with their pain. That's you can combine both things. And I promise that every disabled person will be happy to help you make a disabled character in your books. I don't know any disabled people who wouldn't be like, wait, yeah, I want to talk about that. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's something too. Like, I think a lot of people, again, as someone who is not physically disabled, I think the hesitancy sometimes is to look foolish or to make someone else feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's like, but when I say look foolish, I mean like say something unintentionally offensive, but
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
something that
Yeah.
bothers someone. Not to say that but like I think like the reality is people are much more open to discuss this topic than than
Yeah.
people would think, because there is such
Yeah.
an eagerness, I think. And again, to looking even at unpacking internalized ableism, as we've discussed earlier, like that's
Yeah.
we don't that doesn't happen through just discussion. It happens through art, I feel like,
Yeah.
where we're able to, in my opinion, but I'm also very much a proponent of like the powers of art and everything.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. If you're trying to create a disabled character and you go to a person with that disability and you want to discuss what you have and get their thoughts on it, there are almost definitely going to be points where you have to go, oh crap, I didn't think of that. That was really ableist of me. I should have thought of that. And it's going to expand your mind, and it might be a little bit uncomfortable in the moment, but that's how you learn. And using your art to learn is a great way to do it.
Exactly. It's art. I think that's right there. I think that hits it right there. I have nothing to add for that one. Oh,
yeah.
My goodness.
Now, disabled people are starved for representation. We're going to help you if you ask.
Yeah. And I mean, again, not to get like into the whole literary perspective of it, but if you look at the vast history of disability in representative in art, I always go back to the classics of literature, and they're not too many good pieces of older representation. Like,
no,
you look at like, there's a couple examples I can think of right off the top of my head that, like Hunchback of Notre Dame, for example, and stuff like that. Yeah, the work itself is a great piece of literature, but and I think Victor Hugo on some level was trying to have a net positive in society, but
yeah,
the work itself depends on a lot of not great, if not outright offensive, stereotypes and bigotries, not just for the disabled community, but also for the Romani people, especially the Romani people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And you think of Richard III, again, using that as an externalized example of the inner. But like those kinds of works, they don't have to be what we are anchored to for the rest of our lives. We can write beyond that.
Yeah. Yeah. And now that there's more examples to point to in literature and in video games and in movies and whatever, it's a great time to try to expand on that. Like,
exactly.
if not now, go do it. Now's a really good time to get into it, especially now when you have so much access to strangers on the internet, where you could tweet and say, hey, I need help with this aspect of writing this disabled character. You're gonna get some weird, terrible responses, but mostly you're gonna get help.
Yeah, and from people who can, and the people who are willing to help you, stick with them, because they clearly want to see
make friends there.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, I've heard once or twice that there's some cool disabled people out there. I don't know. People with disabilities? Do you know anyone who's really cool like that?
No, I don't know anything about that.
No, there's
No.
no one cool like that. All right, so I know it's getting a little late, so I'm going to talk about respond to a few comments in chat, and I think we can wrap things up after that. You think? I think we covered a lot of ground, and we're gonna, in 5 hours, kick ourselves for not remembering such and such.
There will be someone where we're like freaked out about. Yep.
Since we started, you're gonna like be in bed at midnight. You're gonna wake up and go, "Fuck!" I didn't think. I'm gonna just scroll through chat real quick, see if there's any like big comments. Some people are talking about the real the extreme Ghostbusters, which I have not actually seen.
No, me neither.
Was it the one that had the Cenobite episode? I saw clips of a Cenobite episode of Ghostbusters where they just had the Hellraiser Cenobites in it, which I think is great, but well, not literally, but a couple mentions about criticism of the combat wheelchair, kind of reflecting what we were just talking before. Not too many wild questions here. A lot of people talking about Toph. An hour after we stopped talking about Toph because she is the best.
Yeah.
Yes, it did have the Cenobites. Okay, cool. We didn't actually. I think we made a conscious choice not to discuss neurodivergent characters. Because that.
Yeah, this time we were gonna do physical and not.
Yeah, if you guys want us to come back.
Non-physical disabilities.
If you guys want us to continue this discussion, which Charlie, if you're up for it, I'm up for it for another time.
Am I up for talking about autistic characters? Yeah.
Good, excellent. So we'll talk about autistic characters next time we have on these streams. Right. There's a lot of ground for that, and there's a lot of discussion there too between characters who are coded autistic versus are actually autistic.
Oh yeah.
In terms of canon, and that's a whole
discussion in and of itself. Yep, absolutely.
I feel like coding doesn't apply as much with physical disability, whereas with non-physical disability is a lot more coding because
absolutely, especially with neurodivergent characters, because then you have masking and all the things that we effectively do to code ourselves as neurotypical on a day-to-day basis. You know, it's that could get really interesting. Yeah,
and that requires a lot of the foundation being set before we even get into like examples, because that, especially when you get into coding, which is a whole other discussion that I think a lot of people
we did consciously choose to keep this one on physical disabilities, but I would absolutely be up for talking about non-physical disabilities.
Oh yeah, and a heartbeat too. I'm down for that as well. Just anything else that's a big point of discussion? It looks like everyone was kind of more just kind of responding to what we were saying in tune. A lot of surprising fans of Avatar.
Oh God.
I'm
not sorry that I hate the movie you like. I'm not sorry. I hate it.
Oh my God.
Oh God.
A lot of discussions about how the creator of Pokemon and Keep Your Hands Off of Izauken is also neurodivergent, but I think we'll save that.
Huh.
Which is cool. I knew that about Pokemon, but not Izauken.
I didn't know.
That's worth discussing, I think, but when we talk about autism, I think collectively. Pokemon and autism is a whole discussion. I can make many jokes about that from personal experience. I think Picard. A lot of people are talking about Picard.
About what?
Picard, the Star Trek show.
Oh, love Picard.
Yeah, Picard's great.
I love Star Trek.
Yeah, what? You like Star Trek?
Extremely biased.
Next thing you say, get in like Mass Effect or something ridiculous.
Only a little.
I don't think you all can't see this, but Charlie's entire office, I'm going to expose you right now, figuratively speaking, is filled to the brim with Mass Effect memorabilia, posters. Still have that Garrus mouse pad. Garrus mouse pad.
Of course I do.
There we go. Yeah, that's when you know you've been on the internet too long, when you've seen words written out more than you've heard them audibly said to your ears. And this is at least not as bad as the time I said called the Scavin the Scavine. I had people from Warhammer fans who I know in real life who saw that, like, just clowning on me for like a week after doing that. I'm like, But yeah, I've only seen the words written out. I'm not gonna say it correctly, guys. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I
avoid saying names for that reason. Like, I'm going to mispronounce it because I've only seen it read. I've only read it. I've never heard it. So
yeah, it's
should get into more audiobooks. That would help.
Well, that's the problem. Also, audiobooks didn't help me. So I do want to wrap up soon, but I'll tell you this real quick. So I was listening to the audiobook for the Dungeons and Dragons books before talking about D&D to make sure I got the pronunciation correctly. And in the one audiobook they call the Underdark City where the Drow live Menzo Berenzon. Or Menzo Berenzon. No, Menzo Berenzon. I think it's Menzo Berenzon. I think it's actually Menzo Berenzon, but they called it Menzo Berenzon, which is such drastic different. It's very drastic. And then I was playing Baldur's Gate where they talk about Menzo Berenzon, and you're like, wait, who's right? Which one of these is correct? Because they're both licensed officially by by the Wizards of the Coast, I think.
Oh yeah.
CSR, I think at the time when the
I guess you can go whatever way you want.
Exactly, but I was told I was saying it wrong, so I'm just gonna say I think I pronounced it both ways in the same video. So I think I think maybe they're both wrong. Who knows?
Maybe.
Who knows? I mean, all I know is I probably won't get it right no matter what.
Yeah.
Oh, and some people are bringing up Doctor Strange in Marvel not curing everyone's ailments when they happen.
Oh, thank God.
Thank God. Except for the one time he should have. And that was with Aunt May after the Kingpin's assassin shot her, and he had to turn to Mephisto to fix Aunt May and Sola's marriage. That was a dumb storyline. Where Doctor Strange, Doctor Doom, Doc Ock, no one could cure a bullet wound. That's dumb. But that's dumb for a different
the fact
reason.
that they were like chasing the cure of the bullet wound was nonsense. But that didn't make any sense. But I do really like that Doctor Strange was never used as like a cure-all. Despite that kind of being there. Except for No Way Home.
Where he makes things worse. He's like, oh yeah, sure. I'll help the child out with this issue and destroy reality as a result.
Which I also kind of like, because then
too.
It's like, okay, well, if you try and do a cure-all, if you try and use magic to cure everything, you're actually going to ruin everything. Which is exactly what would happen.
I do love that. And that's the thing, too, with this whole magic. Don't use magic to fix things. Has no one ever... People, expect magic to work every time. I personally love it when magic gets screwy. I love my David Cronenberg body horror nonsense and all that, too. Anyway, we've gone on too long. I think we should wrap things up. Now...
Alrighty.
Now, Charlie, where can people find you if they've enjoyed your voice and your perspectives on matters?
Is it bad that my first reaction was to say under the bed?
Well,
anyway,
not a bad option, but unfortunately, that's taken up by Freddy Krueger.
I can't go hide under there. I did invite him over, so
Freddy Krueger over here, on the bed, so you gotta deal with that now.
I am on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram as @CKnightWrites. Night like the soldier, not night like at nighttime. And my website is cknightwrites.com. So pretty simple. Once you know the C Knight Writes part, you can find me just about anywhere.
Now, if anyone was interested in your services, can you describe that real quick for any potential writers who might be watching?
Oh, yeah. I am an editor for independent and self-published fiction authors. You can go to my website to learn much more about that. But I provide developmental line and copy edits. I also do provide sensitivity reads, including for disabled and neurodivergent characters. So if that is something you need help with, please reach out. And then I have a Patreon where I offer help and education in things like writing magic systems without going off the rails and trying to cure everyone. And my Patreon is also same name, C Knight Writes.
Are there any types of fiction that you specialize in specifically, or I mean, I'm sure you're big with the furries, which I know you are.
Apparently. I've been doing this for 15 years, so at this point I have edited and am comfortable editing everything. I don't have any limitations on the genres that I'll edit, or I don't have any specialization. Whatever you've got, I'm into it.
And as always, if you're watching this stream, you know where I am, and eventually that book that I sent to Charlie will come out and hopefully be good, and I will discuss that then.
Yeah, it will.
When that bridge comes.
Hell yeah.
But until then, thank you for listening. If you're watching this stream after it's been finished, the links are still there for everyone. Anyway, everything should still be good, and well, I have nothing really to add at this point. My brain's just starting to fizzle out, so I'm just gonna end the stream right now. So goodbye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks, Ant. Thanks, everyone.
Oh, no problem here. All right, end the stream. I'm going to let you guys. My voice is still on chat, isn't it? I think we're still technically on, even though the end screen's up. All right, then. Farewell.